One of the largest growing segments of hateful ideology today is anti-government. One of the largest growing segments of hateful ideology today is anti-government.
This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show, Truth Against Conspiracy Theories. This was a segment that aired on CBS nationally a few days ago that everybody out there needs to see. This is mind control at its worst. This is them begging people to come back into the hive mind. They are begging people to allow Big Brother to reprogram them. Anybody who is escaping the matrix because of events like Helene or Milton, who are starting to understand, because every time the government creates these events, more and more people are waking up because they're poorly produced. They're government agents who sit and pretend to be journalists on television, are horrible actors. They're completely unlikable. And their mechanisms of mind control are weakening on the masses, which is why they're so hellbent, as they'll show you in this clip, to start classifying conspiracy theories as hate speech, which is what I've said since day one was the purpose of hate speech. It can't be defined. It can constantly change, and that's what the goal of it is to get full control over your speech. Because remember, anti-government speech will be considered hate speech, and they even admit it on CBS Good Morning, which I'll play for you in a minute. So this clip, I'm going to break it down into parts so we can discuss each thing said. It is absolutely one of the worst produced mind control experiments that I've seen in a long time done by the mainstream media. Because what they try to do is soft speak the audience out there into believing that anybody out there who's talking about a conspiracy theory is in fact a horrible, hateful person. So even having dialogue about anything that's against what the mainstream media and the government is telling us is now being considered hate speech. And let's start with how this clip began, because they bring up Helene conspiracies. Because again, they didn't expect people out there to start realizing what FEMA's really there to do. And people started because of people like me and you a while ago. And then when Maui hit, it really began. And now that Helene has happened, oh yeah, people are waking up. So they start talking about conspiracies about lithium seizing land and how politicians are controlling the weather to target Republican states. Again, they make sentences like that they'll present to the sheeple. Quote, politicians controlled the weather to target Republican states, to make them think that it is completely an insane thought. Because they don't explain to people how the government has patented weather control, how the government and the Air Force have openly talked about owning the weather by 2025, how this even goes back to JFK and Lyndon B. Johnson talking about their goals back then in the 1950s to control the weather.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
It lays the predicate foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
He who controls the weather will control the world. So it's very psychological. You have to look at this stuff you have to be in a conscious state of mind. You have to be thinking when you're watching this stuff, because they call it programming for a reason. They're programming you. So even sentences like politicians control the weather to target Republican states, it's no different than what we heard about when that pizza event was exposed. We were all saying, look at the stuff these people are posting. If your neighbor was posting this stuff, you would call the police on your neighbor. If your son, your cousin, anyone you knew was posting these things on social media, you would be alarmed to the point that you would probably call the FBI. That's what we were all saying. So the mainstream media came out and they just said, oh, Republicans are saying that Democrats are doing this out of the basement of a pizza parlor. And that's all they repeated, and that's all we ever heard about. And anytime you bring it up to somebody who has little knowledge about it, that's what they repeat to you, is what they're programmed to say. So instead of addressing the ability to control the weather, they put phrases like that out there where they're actually trying to politicize it and say, well, Republicans are claiming that Democrats are killing people with weather. So their heads explode. They can't wrap their heads around any of it. Instead of presenting it like they're supposed to do, because they're supposed to be journalists, and saying, you know, there's this stuff going on with the weather that's strange, and there's a lot of people out there who are talking about HARP and are talking about all of these, military bases that have this technology where they shoot things into the ionosphere. And then we actually see them showing us clips of presidents talking about weather control, weather modification. And then on top of all that, we actually have all these government patents about geoengineering, including things about owning the weather by 2025. So if they were journalists, they would present those things, but they don't. They use mind control techniques like this one I'm about to show you. Watch how they roll their eyes. They call it stupid. They call it ridiculous. They call it without any actual evidence. Well, where's their evidence to prove that it was not weather modification? We'll take all the documentation that you have to present to us, present it to us. We want to know all activity on all military bases around that time period, specifically ones that have high power, high frequency array radio transmitters. Okay, we want to see all the documentation on that. Oh, wait, you don't have to present that to us, right? Because that's top secret information. You know, the people who are supposed to be working for us who have all this stuff, well, they don't have to show it to us. We just have to take them at their word for it, right? We'd also like to see all the actual information about these 5G towers. We'd like to see the setup on these 5G towers. We'd also like to know more about the artificial auroras that are created at HARP. Oh, you don't want to present any of that to us? Oh, okay. Well, this is how they start off their ridiculous news segment. Look.
On Monday, you may remember we told you about bad information about FEMA funding for victims of Hurricane Helene, and now there's even more where that came from. These are wild. Here are some of the other conspiracy theories that have recently popped up. These are completely garbage claims. One of them that the government manipulated the weather to target Republican states, and then the government used Helene to try to seize land in North Carolina to mine lithium. There is no evidence, zip, zero, nothing, to say this is true. It's false. And there are a lot of falsehoods out there. They're spreading like floodwater, you might say, on social media. So how do you talk to people in your life who believe utterly fake stories?
So, of course, 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10 sheeple who see this clip will automatically, their head would catch fire, right? They don't know what that even means about a lithium mine, but they see government seizing land. They say they'll never do that. The government would never seize land. Then they see about, well, politicians controlling the weather to target Republican states. So if they're a Democrat, they just immediately discredit it, right? Instead of giving Democratic voters out there the evidence that the government's actually working together, the Republicans and the Democrats, and they have the capability to do this because there's probably a lot of good Democrats out there with souls who are good people. I have no doubt about that, but they're under heavy hypnosis. These are people who don't know about MK Ultra or any of the government operations with experiments on mind control, right? So this gets better, right? But the guy you heard talking there, rolling his eyes, is Tony DeCopel, who, of course, is put on mainstream television because he's a trained operative. If you didn't get the memo yet, you don't just go to school and then look better than everyone else, sound better than everyone else, and get put on national television. You actually are trained as a government asset. You go through institutions like the Tavistock Institute, where they teach you how to operate things like mind control through the way that they speak, the mannerisms that they use, which is why all these guys on TV look and talk the same. It's a form of hypnotism. They are very soft-spoken, which is how they keep a lot of people under mind control. They speak to them in wavelengths that makes it people very programmable. It slips them into a delta wavelength when you watch television. And then they speak to you and sound like they're your therapist, like they're loving and they're caring. And then they start programming you with the lies known as the news, which, if you didn't get the memo, there's nothing more fabricated than the mainstream news. So if you didn't know, DeCopel, or whatever Tony's last name is, just coincidentally is a Zionist. That has nothing to do with any of this, of course. That's a conspiracy in itself, right? And his children happen to currently live in Israel with their mother. So those are all just, mere coincidences. But this is where this really gets interesting. All right, so let's go. They bring on a guy, and you can just look at the guy, and you'll just say to yourself, oh, here we go. You know the guy, how he votes, how he speaks. It's all the same thing, right? These are programmed human beings. This is not natural what you're seeing, but they're very worried that people are leaving the hive mind. So they bring on a guy who has a website, a company called Life After Hate. That's right, Life After Hate, where they talk about compassion. As a leader in the violence intervention community, we are committed to helping people break free from lives of violent hate and extremism to connect with humanity and lead compassionate lives. So you might hear that and say, well, what in the world does that have to do with anything that we're talking about, with weather control, weather modification, government patents? No, it has nothing to do with it. But this is how they dupe people into thinking that people like us are dangerous, violent, or extreme. And he even goes on to talk about and compare the stuff that we're saying, where we're saying, look, these storms are weird. We're not going to take the science that you're feeding us called climate change. We're not going to eat that, just like we didn't want to eat the graphene oxide you were just trying to feed us, right? They were shocked that people rejected that and listened to people like us. Now they're getting shocked that people are rejecting the science because suddenly their mind control program is wearing off on people, right? So he comes on here and instead of addressing the stuff we're talking about, which 10 out of 10 people would hear the stuff we all talk about, I talk about on this channel, and they'd say, either this guy's off his rocker or, whatever, I don't really, it doesn't interest me, right? But they're trying to convince people to think that what I'm saying is calling for violence or extremism because we're calling out the government to show us all the documentation that they have if they want us to, where the things we're saying, if they say it's so crazy, and we show them patents and we show you all these things that the government has the capability of doing, why can't they provide evidence to us? They're supposed to be working for us. That's how a government works. We elect them, they're our employees. So they're supposed to present, but they don't want you to think like that. So instead they come on and they say, these people are extreme. Doesn't it stress you out that people are thinking like this, talking like this? It's really just giving people mental health problems, right? Well, it is giving people mental health problems. Once they actually realize what the government's doing to them, it'll give everybody a mental health problem. But here's the solution to it. You don't need a therapist and you don't need talking heads on TV to brainwash you back into it. What we need is the removal of all these people who are responsible for it. And I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about remove them, shut it off, get away from them, break free from it, break free from the tech. There's lots of solutions that they don't want you to think about. They just want the common sheeple to think that breaking away and all this stuff we're talking about means violence. It means, look, if you figured out that the government was trying to murder you, what would you do about it? Would you sit there and smile? Well, that's how they want you to act. To sit there and smile. Listen to this guy go on to talk about hate speech and now how hate speech is in fact anti-government speech.
Patrick Ricard is the head of a nonprofit group called Life After Hate, and he joins us now to talk all about it. Ricards, right?
Yes.
How do you do it?
Well, I think it's a challenge. I think, what we see now is there are flavors of hate for just about everybody these days. You can find somebody to blame for what you think you're not getting in your life. There's, the grievance politics has gotten worse and worse. I think, the lithium story is the perfect example. One of the largest growing segments of hateful ideology today is anti-government.
So this is what we've gotten to. This is what I've warned about with hate speech. And it's working on people because we see people who try to censor people like me and you because they don't like what we're saying. And it really, for them, what it comes down to is arrogance. They feel like we think we're smarter than they are, and that's not what it's about. We've all been duped. We've all been sucked into this matrix. Most of us went through the school system and got poisoned with their lies, and we broke free miraculously thanks to God, who is the only truth in this world. Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. These things are revealed to us for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. So now we're at a point, right, where all we've heard about hate speech, people like me have been yelling and saying, look, they're transferring hate speech over to us. They're trying to tweak it so that people start looking at us as extremists. And we've seen that now over the last couple of years. Now, this guy's flat on TV talking about, we're talking about weather, a storm, right? We're talking about a storm. Let's just all clarify together. We're talking about a hurricane, right? We're saying that it was man-made. They're saying that that's hate speech, to say that a storm is man-made. Now, how is that hate speech? Can somebody explain to me how it's hate speech? It's hate speech to say the government has weather technology that can manipulate the weather, but it's hate speech to call them out on it? Because, of course, hate speech now, as he's telling you, is anti-government rhetoric. So anti-government is now being poisoned into people's minds as being, these people are dangerous, it's extreme. So it's dangerous and extreme to question the government and what they're doing. So if you run a company, okay, and you have employees working under you, are you allowed to question them and what they're doing? What if your employees are doing drugs on the clock or something that you don't want them to do on the clock or stealing money at the register and you run the company, right? And one day you go in and all the money's out of the safe and there's nothing in the register, right? Are you allowed to question the guy who's standing there with the briefcase with your money in it? I would think so, right? Because he works for you and you caught him stealing from you, right? Well, think of it from that perspective, but most people don't because they don't realize the government is our employee. They're not our master. They're not our idol. They're our employee. They're in there to serve us. But guess what? They don't really. They just don't want you to realize that they're not, that they're working together. And that's where the word conspiracy comes from. Conspiring, right? What's the definition of conspiring or conspiracy? It is a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful. So if there's a group who's doing something unlawful or harmful, who are in the act of plotting against good, innocent people like me, you, and everybody else out there who is a civilian, you'd think you'd be able to call them out on it. But they're trying to convince people that that is actually hate speech. That's what we've gotten to. So as we continue on here, who again, you got to wonder what team this guy's playing for, right? The guy who's, he goes on TV, looks like this. This is just the typical commie foot soldier. This guy is, right? He's got his like bright blue shirt with his orange underneath. He's got a cue ball. He's all cleaned up, right? He's got like rubbing oil on his head. And he speaks like this as if he's smarter than everybody else. And they down talk people like us without presenting anything at all. They just stand there on TV and they go, these people are out of their mind. Are we? Are we? We have documentation and proof. The problem is that we don't have a platform because we all keep getting removed from the platforms because they're trying to control the narrative. So as he continues on, he brings up the weather. And real quickly, let me play this for you about, well, what he says about the weather.
The weather is nothing new. We've been accusing the Jewish community of manipulating weather in these groups for years.
So that's another one of the talking points, like I mentioned earlier in the video. Politicians controlled the weather to target Republican states. They're doing something underneath a pizza parlor, which makes people think about their local pizzeria. What could that possibly be happening? Hillary Clinton's under a pizzeria. It all sounds insane, right? And then, of course, that was one of the deliberate things they put out there, quote unquote, certain people, space lasers, right? Space lasers. So what does that make people automatically think? Of insanity. They've been programmed to think that. Instead of, again, looking at the evidence, looking at documentation from your United States Air Force, the military who's supposed to be serving you and protecting you, who has a thing called weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather in 2025, right? So would your perspective change if the government came out and said, yeah, we can control the weather? Of course your perspective would change. But what do you need them to admit to it for? When it's there, it's proof that it's there. If they came out and admitted it, people would suddenly say, even Democrats, they go, well, I don't know if they're murdering people, but can't they end the droughts? Can't they correct global warming just with the technology that they have? We wouldn't have to curb our way of living, right? We wouldn't have to suck carbon out of the air, have a carbon footprint to track and monitor us. Yeah, they could just, make weather better and end all these droughts, right? Well, they don't want you to think that. That's why they won't admit to weather modification. So as much as people out there might doubt the things that we say about them creating it to kill, because that's hard for people to understand because they see these people on TV. That's why I told you they roll them out on Stephen Colbert on these Tonight shows to make people feel like, oh, I know him. Oh, I know this politician. Oh, yeah, I'm a fan of his. I'm a fan of theirs. Oh, they'd never do that because they're in hypnosis. They think they know these people, which is what the television does. It makes people think they know the celebrities. Oh, they would never do that. How many people you hear say, we talk about satanic rituals with celebrities. They go, oh, they would never do that. How do you know? You know them? Well, yeah, I follow them on social media. All right, so you only know what they show you, just like the friend most people have on social media who posts all these positive things. And then when you see them in real life, they're completely miserable. And you're like, wow, they show a totally different life, a different side of them on social media. Yeah, because it's fake. It's fabricated, okay? So my point being is that the majority of people would have a tough time actually believing the fact that the government would do this to civilians. It would take a while for them to actually understand it, but eventually they would. Eventually they would, because once they start realizing all this stuff and then realizing who they are and what they practice in secret, they'd say, oh my gosh, I could see them as like Jeffrey Dahmers. They're not really who they say that they are. But let's take that aspect out of it. Take that aspect out of it, remove the whole space laser thing, come out on TV and admit to the fact that JFK, Lyndon B. Johnson have admitted to weather control back in the 40s. And now we're sitting at a point where not only is there weather control, they're using it. So people would actually say, well, maybe I don't think they're doing it for that, but why can't they do it for this? Because the answer is simple. They can't do it to help humanity because they need the climate laws. They need the carbon footprint because that's how they enslave humanity. So they need you to continue to believe in it, period. They don't want to help humanity. Thus, they'll never reveal the fact that this actually exists because then people wouldn't worry about the climate anymore and they would lose control over people. So let me continue because this gets better. So now he starts talking about how to talk to people about misinformation. Don't condemn them, respectfully ask questions. Avoid fact checking. Yes, he literally says to avoid fact checking because fact checking apparently angers stuff like us. Well, they want these people to avoid fact checking because they don't have any facts. They just regurgitate what they hear on the television, right? So when we present evidence of here's a patent, here's what the government was doing in Vietnam, here are these other things, and this doesn't just go for weather modification, it goes for everything we all talk about, everything, where there's actual evidence, right? They don't have any. So thus, they want to avoid fact checking because when they just repeat something that they hear on TV and then you call them out and say, well, here's this, they don't know what to do. They turn beet red. And then they just repeat themselves until they eventually go, I'm done with this. I'm done with this conversation because they don't have anything to give to you or present to you other than doubting you because they've been programmed to doubt you. So here they are talking about misinformation. And you got to love how they talk to you like, they're a friendly psychiatrist who's here to help. Oh, they're so calmly, like they would present someone like me and they'd be like, he's angry, he's hateful. And I'm not. I'm passionate, I'm fired up because I'm sick of people meddling in my life, your life, all of our lives. And they have enough already. The globalists have so much endless money. We're all already slaves to this system, to money and having to pay, we pay taxes on land so we don't even end up owning everything. And they want more. And they want more. And it's enough already. It's enough. But listen to how he talks and how people out there would hear that and they'd be like, yeah, I would side with the guy on the TV over this guy yelling rebel call or whoever he is, whatever name he is this month, because, he sounds like he's a lot nicer.
So how do you I can understand why people latch on to things, but how do you get them to move off of it if they're still in that condition of being scared or angry?
I think particularly if it's somebody that you care about, if it's a family member, if it's a loved one, if it's a close friend, you have to do what you have to practice compassion, not condemnation. It's very easy when you see somebody saying things that are just so ridiculous that you want to condemn them, you want to confront them. That doesn't work. If you truly want to get people to come back, if you truly want to get them to realize the error in their thinking and in their ways, you have to show compassion. You have to seek to understand where is it you're finding this information? Why do you believe what you believe? That's the only way you can begin the dialogue that's going to help them exit lives of extremism.
But you say in that dialogue not to fact check people.
Yes.
How can that be?
Because when you fact check people, you drive them deeper into their own rabbit hole. You drive them deeper into their own ideology. What they will do is they will claim, I found this online. And just saw your last segment. We can find anything online. I can find proof on multiple websites for the most ridiculous, outrageous gossip. They will simply say, look, I know that I am correct, and here's my proof for it. We don't want them to do that.
So, of course, he talks like that to you, and then he starts saying, understanding pushback on hate speech, right? So they're still pushing together. Hate speech, fact-checking, don't condemn, because they don't want you to confront somebody who has actual facts and evidence because they'll blow your mind away with actual information. So, in other words, they're pretty much telling you, audience, that people like us have mental health problems, which, again, isn't a real thing, by the way. I mean, there's mental health problems going on because of the stuff that they're doing in the air and the atmosphere with radio waves and frequencies. There's certainly problems there and anxiety and things from the chemicals in the food. But as far as mental health, how come people in the 1800s weren't suffering from mental health? Did you hear a lot of stories of people in like the Wild West time period or Little House days that were suffering from heavy depression and anxiety and panic attacks? All right, those things didn't exist then because they weren't getting drilled with frequencies every single day like we are. So as we progress in this interview, okay, there's just two more clips you got to see. They start talking about shining light on people like us because we're so negative, right? We're negative, so people need to dismiss what we're saying. It's pretty much what they start saying. It's therapy type of talk. It's too much for them to handle, which, by the way, I've talked about psychology before, right? Basic psychology and how adults regress to childhood-like behavior when faced with constant conflict or confrontation they can't handle, which is what you're seeing in today's world. The government is so down everybody's throats, you're seeing grown men acting like children, right? Everybody's going retro, going back to things they enjoyed as kids. I'm not making fun of anyone who's doing these things or has done these things. I'm telling you, a basic form of psychology for why people are feeling and acting that way is because of the constant bombardment and harassment and confrontation that the government is forcing on people through the media every single day, the division that they're causing. All the stuff they're doing, it comes down into our everyday life. It trickles down where you might have a relative you haven't seen, but oh, they're brainwashed into this, so it affects you talking to them at the dinner table. Oh, they actually believe that this is real, they believe that's real, and then they look at you and they're like, oh, you're one of those? Boom, they've affected your life. That's how it works, right? They control the information flow, they control the narrative, so they're the ones who are brainwashing everybody, and they don't want you to come out of the brainwashing because they lose control. So here he talks about how they need to start changing people's minds and steering them back into the hive mind, using things like, well, trauma-based mind control is pretty much what he's talking about. Listen.
So does it make it worse when you do a news program and you say, here's what people are saying, these things are utterly untrue?
Not at all. I think what becomes really important when we look at this ideology, when we look at the problems of these extremism that we see, we have to cast more sunlight on the issue. If we don't do that, if we simply ignore it, we drive it deeper underground. We need to have these discussions in public. We need to call it out when we can.
I know, because you're not supposed to talk about these things. You're not supposed to talk about, religion, sex, politics at the dinner table, but you're saying talk about it. So how do you go from talking, right, engaging someone, using empathy, to actually changing their minds, bringing them back to reality, helping them understand that what they're believing is not true?
I think we often have to ask ourselves, why do they believe this? Why have they gone down this path? And what we typically see, I work at an organization called Life After Hate. We help individuals exit lives of violent extremism, help them leave online hate spaces. And what we often see there is there tends to be trauma behind the thought. They're pursuing these ideas because something has happened in their lives. You don't know what it is. You don't know what's going to trigger it. But you often realize that most of these folks, they're going to hit rock bottom. They're going to realize that their ideology is causing them great harm. You want to be there to help them get out when the time is right.
So when they use the word trauma, it's interesting because the news is actually a form of trauma-based mind control. When we talk about MKUltra and CIA operations on the mind, look no further, Operation Mockingbird, all this stuff that everybody out there should know, which should be common knowledge at this point. Everybody out there should know that these mind control experiments did exist. The government admitted to doing it, and we've taken them at their word that they don't do it anymore. Well, of course, because now it's every single day, because that's what the media is used as. It's a form of trauma-based mind control. He even goes on to say that people like us are going to hit rock bottom. Right? So in other words, he's saying that you're eventually going to realize that you can't win, or that you're supposed to just wave the white flag and quit as we take more and more of your freedoms away. So you might as well just come back to us, right? Just be positive while we're spitting in your face. Just be positive while we're kicking you directly in your nards. Yeah, just be positive about it. Smile is what they want you to do, right? And I love how the common people out there don't realize that the way that they because I don't know, any of you might have therapists or things like that. I don't believe in any of that kind of stuff. But the way that they've always presented therapists and psychiatrists in these TV shows is exactly how these news anchors talk to you, right? Like a therapist. It's because it's a form of hypnotism, okay? That's what it is. So as they continue on here pretending to be your friend and care about you, and of course, there's light at the end of the tunnel, ladies and gentlemen. There's light if you believe in their propaganda, and they extend their hand to you and telling you, look, the world's a lie. Everything's a lie, but just believe in the lie, because then you don't have to have anxiety and stress anymore. You'll end up in hell. You'll end up realizing when things finally click in your head that you're actually enslaved now, because we put all these things in place to protect ourselves from all of you, not just the ones that we like right now and won't like tomorrow. But they go on to talk about pretty much saying people like us, well, they want to pull people out who listen to people like me and you, because hopefully they'll see the error in their ways, and hopefully they could pull them out of the actual truth and bring them back into the matrix.
You want to be able to offer that helping hand to show them that there is a way to exit out of a life of hate.
But how do you get there? I mean, people hit rock bottom, whether they do or they don't, and they do it on their own. How do you get someone to the point where they're able to turn the page?
It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of discussions. What we do is we tend to work in two different ways. We have individuals that'll help them work through this. We'll help them address some of find mental health professionals who can help them deal with some of their issues. who will help them address some of the social and psychoeducational issues they're dealing with. But you also have to connect them with peers. You have to show them that there are individuals who once believed what they believed, who have seen the error in their ways and have gotten out. They need to realize that getting out is possible.
So they're literally telling you, if you're out there and you're listening to these things, you're going to be depressed. You're going to hate your life. Why do that to yourself, right? Why know the truth? Why not just live in the lie that we're creating for you? We've created this simulated reality called the Matrix for you. So please live in it. You don't have to worry about the stuff that people like Rebel Call are yelling about. Live in the dystopia. And then, of course, when you realize that it's literally hell and there's no turning back, well, then you can worry about it then. But isn't it stressful to worry about it now? Isn't it just too much? They're literally telling you to come back into the hive mind. That's what he's saying. The hive mind. A large number of people who share their knowledge or opinions with one another. But it's in an echo chamber. It's all the same people sharing the same information, and it's all information that they're told are facts that are given to them from the government who is lying and deceiving you. But if you question that, of course, that is hate speech. So they're literally begging you, if you've woken up to the hurricanes and now you're investigating weather modification, which is great, they're telling you, look, that's too much for you to handle. You're looking at HAARP, you're looking at all these bizarre northern lights that keep popping up. Stop. Isn't it stressful? And those people are probably going, yes, it is, because it is very stressful when you first wake up. And they don't want you to go deeper down the rabbit hole. Because once you do and you fully wake up, it is a lot better. In the beginning, it's very difficult to wrap your head around stuff. There's still days where something happens and I can't believe what I'm seeing. I mean, there's been things with like Wayfair and lots of like things like that we've seen out in the open. The pizza stuff, obviously, one of the big ones that really just got to me, where I just can't believe what I'm looking at that's out in the open. But once you escape and you go deeper down the rabbit hole, you actually cure yourself. You cure yourself from the world of lies and you see everything differently. And it is beautiful because you do feel free, even though we all feel under constant attack every single day because they're coming after us every single day. But I certainly would rather be living in truth than been living inside of a simulated reality filled with lies, smiling while Big Brother tasers me in the gonads. I'd rather be dealing with this head on, facing the attacks that the sheeple are putting on all of us and trying to pull them out of the matrix, because it's very clear that they are getting more desperate by the day because they're continually seeing, because remember, the internet serves for them as a mind. So they see all the stuff that we're sharing and talking about. They're seeing what gets likes. That's why they're so angry. They're like, don't share this. This is missing, because they don't want people to wake up, and they can't believe how many people are seeing through their bullcrap. And I've talked about this. Sometimes I used to wonder, is the CIA really this bad? Or are they doing this stuff to just rub it in our faces to see still how many people are actually falling for it? But they still didn't expect this. They've expected stuff now with the events that happen at schools ever since the Hook event, where they were like, whoop, looks like too many people got a hold of us. Then they went over the top and they did the Alex Jones things where everybody out there just started getting more and more suspicious of like, wait, what is this over? Hurting people's feelings because you questioned a story in the news where there was never even a trial, right? So if you're somebody out there who was on trial for murder or whatever, and somebody out there was questioning whether or not you committed the murder or whatever, you could look at it and say that you could sue them, or vice versa. The murderer can now sue you because you hurt their... I mean, it's all make-believe. They're making it up as they go, and people are becoming suspicious. And now with the weather, because their propaganda with the climate hasn't worked the way they expected it to, they politicized it to a point where they're trying to make sure they could at least keep all Democrats on board with it. That's the main thing for them. The conservatives are getting more and more awake. They just need to come out of the left-right divide. That's what they need to come out of. It's hard for them to come out of it, especially when they see how programmable and dumbed down the Democrats are. That's part of the problem. But you got to understand that we've all been under mind control, and not all conservatives are fully awake, because they still think that people like Mitt Romney or Donald Trump or any of them are representing them. They're not elected or put there. They're placeholders. They prevent revolutions. They prevent all of us from actually stopping this from going any further, because we all put our hope into the basket of a vote. And then we're supposed to accept the outcome and then watch them move us around like chess pieces. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Big Brother, the mainstream media, they didn't expect people to start researching weather modification and weather control. They thought that everybody would just stop at quotes like, you can't control the weather. But when presented evidence like this channel presents and others out there present with literally patents and everything else that I've shown you over the years, they don't have an answer for it. So their answer is, oh, those people, they're sick. They need help. You know, that's a mental health problem. Is it? Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, is based, if a company has a trademark or a patent on some type of technology, is it, do you have a mental health problem if you are aware of the company's patent, right? Like if somebody has a patent on, if Apple has a patent on a watch that could serve as a phone, are we allowed to bring that up and say, hey, they have a patent on it? Well, of course you are, right? You're like, yeah, you can bring it up. Why not? We're selling it. Oh, but why can't we bring up government patents and things that the military are actually doing? And all these weapons that they have that are not used for what they were telling you they were being built for. They're being used for you. Well, because you're not allowed to do that. That's why. You have a mental health problem if you're thinking that way. And people out there aren't falling for it as much anymore because they feel it. They feel the government overreach, right? They can feel something wrong. They see it by their behavior. It's backfiring on them, and they want to pull you back in to the hive mind. I thank everybody for being here. It was a longer episode than I had expected, but I went on a bit of a rant. These types of things always kind of, when I see them, I get going because I just laugh hysterically when I see it the first time, then I got to go back through it. And I just look at this and I think of all the stuff that I know about how they operate. It's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. Meanwhile, these are the same people who are hell-bent on censoring people like us, not allowing us to make income, not allowing us to say the things that we feel, right? It's pathetic. What they should do is just draw a line and say, look, there's God and the devil, there's good and bad. And you can choose your side. You can get knowledge from both. One's a lie, one's a truth. Believe what you want. That should be what's going on. There should be part of universal law is free will. And they're trying to take that away by taking away information and making sure you just suck on Satan's information, which is nothing more than a lie, because he is the father of lies. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all well. God bless you and your families as always.